Last week, I made a video called 13 Reasons Why Making an Album is a Terrible Idea. And to say that video did well is a bit of an understatement. Over 1,500 of you guys commented on it. Some of you agreed, some of you disagreed, and some of you took it rather personally. The underlying theme I got is that not many of you look at making records from a business standpoint. And there's nothing wrong with that as long as you have reasonable expectations. So let's take a look at the other side of the argument. Here's 11 reasons why making an album is a great idea. Number 1, it's an investment in yourself. If music is your hobby and you have no delusions of grandeur, you're right, then by all means, go make a record. Musicians buy a lot of expensive shit that they don't need. Name brand guitars from a certain American manufacturer that don't stay in tune very well, yet command outrageous price tags. Wonder who that could be. Or very expensive amp modelers that allow guitar players to change their virtual amp for each song that they play. Yet nobody in the audience can tell or gives a flying fuck. But I've always respected the philosophy of don't look at what I can buy, but look at what I can do. And if you've got the ambition and the songwriting skills to make a full-length album, then I say go for it. Because there is something to be said for setting a goal and achieving it. And something you can be proud of. Yeah, that's my album. I worked my ass off to make it. And that's great. It shows a serious level of commitment and proves that you can follow through on something difficult. Number 2, you'll have something to sell at shows that aren't happening right now. In the last video, I got a lot of responses from people in bands saying they sell a lot of albums at gigs. And that's commendable. Well done. If you're playing a lot of shows and you're selling a lot of merch at those shows, suddenly you have graduated from being a hobby level band to becoming financially viable. However, I'm not sure what the gigging situation overall is right now in the fall of 2021. It's kind of a regional thing, and the goalposts are being moved constantly in terms of what's open and what's allowed. Some areas have full gigs and no restrictions. Some are in total lockdown. Needless to say, it's a lot harder to sell merch if you can't play shows. You can plan for your future gigs, but please don't bet the farm on it, because it's anyone's guess as to how things will go over the next year. But if you've got shows booked, having something to sell is a damn good plan. Just make sure the person running your merch table is somebody you can trust with the money. And please, don't let the club owners take a percentage of your merch sales. They sell the tickets and they sell the drinks. They can make their money that way. A venue owner taking a percentage of your merch is just a total scumbag move. I've had friends go out on tour and venues have tried to take a cut. It's like, hey asshole, they need this money to buy food and gas so they can get to the next show, you greedy fuck! And those venue owners usually get told to go fuck themselves. Rightfully so. Like seriously, what are they gonna do? Take your money? Take your merch? That's theft. The worst they can do is forbid you from playing there again. And that's fine. All you have to do is tweet out to your fans that you won't be playing venue X ever again due to them demanding a percentage of something that doesn't belong to them. And let the other bands you're playing with know as well, because that venue might have a much harder time finding someone to play shows in the future. Never be afraid to shine a 50 billion candle power searchlight on scummy club owners because they'll scurry away like the cockroaches they are. But it is a good idea to find out in advance if the club owner is demanding a percentage of your merchandise before you book the show. And if they do want a percentage, tell them to fuck right off and book a show somewhere else. Number 3, you'll have something to sign at the shows. Okay, so you fought off the greedy club owner and you have your merch table set up. You can hang out after your show and sign copies of your records for those who buy them. It's a great interaction that makes the experience for the fan that much more personal. And it helps you build up your reputation of not being a self-centered prick. Chances are, you might even sell more copies. Number 4, you hate money. I find it odd that the first time I do a business-oriented video on making an album, viewers lost their minds screaming about, "You're only looking at this from a financial perspective." Yes, that's right, because not many musicians do, and wind up being taken advantage of. We've all heard story after story of musicians signing bad recording deals, selling millions of records and winding up with absolutely nothing. Here's the thing. You don't have to be a million selling artist to get screwed financially. You can be an indie artist and still fuck yourself. If If you're determined to make an album, going into it with just a little bit of knowledge of how the business side of things work is not a bad thing. If you're happy with being a broke, struggling musician who's doing it for the art instead of the money, that's fine too. Just make sure you've got a day job. Number 5, you're in a Rosebush band. What the hell is a Rosebush band? It's one of those super Puritan metal groups that has those indecipherable logos like Skid Mark, Anal Leakage, and let's not forget about Satan's Pals. The thing is about these bands, they tend to have a rather dedicated fan base who will buy their products. I was just speaking to a member of the band Parallax Occlusion, and he was explaining to me how he has sold well over $10,000 in products online to the band's fans. And they've broken it down to such: 416 digital downloads, 250 CDs, 120 vinyl records, and weirdly enough, 300 cassettes. I saw cassettes for sale at the Shredmonton Festival a few years back, and that struck me as really odd. I mean, like, people still buy these things? I mean, I've got several hundred in my archive from my teenage years, but I really don't miss them. But that's the thing about metal fans. They can be a bit fanatical about things and they still love cassettes. And apparently they want to party like it's 1985. Obviously, they're not buying these things for their sound quality. I don't get it, but if there's a demand, make sure your band can meet it. It's really not too expensive to do. You can get 100 made for about $300 US. So about that band. Now that they've established themselves with a pair of 22-minute demos, they'll be making a full-length album that should clock in at about 35 minutes. And they've already got a fan base. And that's the great thing about social media. They can keep their fans informed as to what's coming up and market to the correct people. Did I mention that this group is doing their marketing solely on Instagram? I hope to get to do a video with the band in the near future and discuss their marketing strategy. I've got a feeling that a lot of bands could use some help with this. Number 6, crowdfunding. One method that might be just a little bit smarter than the unknown band releases an album, sales tank, band breaks up, is to crowdfund your project. Now, crowdfunding is nothing new, and we've seen some really cool shit come out of it. My personal favorite was the digital Bolex camera. Too bad Kodak stopped making the sensors because I really wanted one of those. Anyway, my point being is if you can convince enough people to pay for your record before you record, suddenly it's not such a bad investment. It's a great way to cover your production costs and build a solid fan base. Because for a fan, getting a disc in the mail from a project that you supported and believed in is a very satisfying experience. It's like, fuck yeah, this was worth it. Take the band Helion Prime, for example. They raised over $16,000 in Kickstarter to fund their new album. Now that's a solid investment. It'll cover production costs and possibly even leave a bit left over to make a music video with. And a band can offer different reward tiers, from the bare bones to the signed CDs, shirts, posters, all that stuff. The only problem is you gotta have a bit of a following to make it happen. So it's kind of a what comes first paradox, like trying to find your first job. Everybody is hiring people with experience, but you can't get any experience if you don't have a job. Same thing here. Crowdfunding is a great way to raise money for a recording project, but who's gonna want to invest in a band that they haven't heard before? And the way to get yourself heard is to record something. Number 7, the single strategy. Now this was the crux of my argument from last week's episode, 13 reasons why recording an album is a terrible idea. Release a single, see if it gets any traction, then do the album. Apparently this was lost on more than a few people. Some even suggested that I didn't state I was referring to new bands. That's funny because that was literally the first thing I said in the video! Can I get a replay? You've got a new band. You get along great, your shows are great, there's a great vibe, and now it's time to share your music with the world. So apparently the phrase, "you've got a new band," was somehow interpreted as, this video is for clearly established bands with massive followings. And you guys wonder why I fucking yell all the time! I can say it plain as day and I still get, duh, fucking musicians. So anyway, yes, release a single and maybe do a video for it. I already covered it last week, but for a quick recap, Bloodywood did a video for the song Ari Ari and it got over 5 million views on YouTube. What a killer track! And now they're working on a full length. The great thing is they now have 5 million potential customers to sell that record to. I even want to buy a copy of that record. I'm really curious to see what they come up with. Realistically though, most people won't buy a physical copy and will wind up streaming the songs. Hopefully the band can make a few bucks and break even on their production costs, but with how little money Spotify gives for plays, I wouldn't hold my breath. Now, I've also gotten a few comments on how review sites won't review singles. Now, that might not be completely true. I found out about Extinction Level Event not by an album review, but by a video review I found on metalsucks.net. So maybe take your best song and make a video for it. If it's entertaining, people will watch. Now, here's a hint for all you guys who want to shoot their own videos themselves. It's real important that the video isn't just shot after a shot of you guys staring at your fretboards. It's really fucking boring and nobody's gonna give a shit. Because here we are now. Entertain us. Number 8, don't overdo it. When albums were exclusively on vinyl, there was a physical limit on how much music you could actually put on them. Many classic albums clocked in at around 40 minutes, and that was absolutely fine. I never quite got the whole let's make a 72-minute album thing, because that's what bands started doing once CDs came along. The strategy of always leave them wanting more is one that works. I've listened to Megadeth's Peace Sells numerous times and always wanted more at the end. That's a much better reaction to have to your music than, hooray, it's finally fucking over. 72 minutes can be a little self-indulgent at times. It's like drum editing. Just because you can, doesn't mean you should. Number 9, working on an album can be therapeutic. If you've got a shitty job, working on a record can be a great way to give you purpose and focus. I spent 27 years on an assembly line building minivans for Chrysler. Believe me, I understand boring and repetitive. And I came about this fucking close to losing it one night, as the monotony and the hopelessness of the situation were closing in around me. I saw it affect my coworkers as well. Drugs and alcohol were their way to escape. But for me, it was the next project. I pretty much always had a new project to work on. A demo, an EP, and yes, even the occasional full-length album. Each project brought its own unique challenges, different style of music, different approach. Something was always new, something was always changing. And this was a great counterpoint to the tedium of the assembly line. Because I'd bring in an iPod to work and a notepad, and I'd listen to mixes of what I was working on for my whole shift. And then I'd come home with a ton of notes and make adjustments. That was my existence for many years, and that's what kept me sane. And there's no reason writing an album can't be the same experience for the musician with a shitty day job. Just bear in mind, the world really doesn't need a double record concept album about life on an assembly line. That might not be the best story to tell. Come to think of it, metal concept albums probably aren't the greatest idea ever. For confirmation on that statement, check out Kiss's The Elder or Judas Priest's Nostradamus. Whew. Number 10, the vinyl resurgence. Now, I have always loved vinyl records, and the fact that there is a huge resurgence in the format is fantastic. Last year was amazing with over 27.5 million LPs sold in the US. Now, that's just a drop in the bucket compared to album sales in the 70s and 80s, but the fact that people are laying down their hard-earned money for a physical copy of music is absolutely great. LPs are just a different experience. The artwork is bigger, some of the records come with gatefolds, you have to drop it onto a record player, and honestly, it kind of forces you to pay more attention to the music. Music these days is all too often treated as background noise, and an LP brings that music to the forefront. Now, the really great news is that you can get an album press for a reasonable amount of money these days. Back in 2019, I visited the Deep Grooves vinyl manufacturing facility in the Netherlands, and they make some really amazing stuff. And not just the standard black disc. You can get colored, you can get marbled. There are many artistic choices to make. Just be sure to get in touch with them before you have your songs mastered. It is a very different approach than digital. The short version is, the last thing you want to do is try to make your songs as loud as possible. That's a serious no-no for cutting an LP. Now, I've even got the Witherfall LP that has an etching on the vinyl. That's really cool, and it's just a different experience than playing back a digital file. And Helion Prime has a vinyl pressing coming up as well. If you want to get a copy of that, I'll have a link in the description below. Number 11, you'll convert all the kids that listen to music on their phones. It is a sad state because music has been delegated to the background. It's great that we can carry around an entire library of music on one of these things. The not so great part is that we just wind up ignoring most of it. It's just next, 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 in a never-ending quest to find something better. But when you release your album, well, that's gonna change everything, because your music is that awesome. People won't be able to put it down, and they'll have to listen to every single note from start to finish. Kids will stop listening on their phones and buy a full-size stereo system to consume your music in the best way possible. And while you're performing impossible miracles, don't forget to prove that black is really white and get yourself killed at the next zebra crossing. Look, technology has changed the game completely when it comes to the way how music is produced and consumed. You can still make records and maybe even make a few bucks along the way. Just make sure you go into the process with realistic expectations. Because the awful truth is, most recording projects fail to become commercially viable. If you're making records for the fun of it because it's what you love to do, that is totally fine. Lots of people have expensive hobbies, and recording can definitely be an expensive hobby. Just don't bankrupt yourself along the way. We'll do that one more time. So